yesterday and at a conference a couple of years ago. He talked about to better understand the educational learning processes, the mechanisms through which schooling policies and practices affect students. And he said it means looking beyond what works to looking how, what, why, for whom. So I want to give you some things to think about that we found. Just go through this. So I will talk a little bit later about recruitment of schools, if those of you are interested, because recruiting 180 schools is not a single step process. There's lots of people that are involved in consenting to that and considerations. But I want to call your attention here to an assumption that we had about the processes of schooling, which is that there is sufficient stability in the system in order to receive an intervention and time enough to actually see it through. And I've been doing professional development for a long time, and we've always sort of known, and I think everyone that's worked in schools knows, that there are teachers that come and go. If you stay around for more than a year, you see that. And initially, when I first started in this business, I thought it was an aberration. Pretty soon, if you're just oriented toward professional development, you take it as a given and you try to plug the holes as fast as they're forming. But in this study, what we did was to actually quantify and track by individual teacher what happened to them. And my staff in the back there has very detailed records of the trajectory and course of events of each teacher. So what we did when we started the study, we began in June of 2009. We had spent that whole spring recruiting schools and getting teacher consent forms, right, and principal consent forms. So at that time, in 7th grade, I'm just going to show you how we tracked this. We looked at each of, we looked at the timeline in terms of windows. That's my terminology. So the window in June 30th of 2009, I called it the A window. And so I put, these are some teacher names here and the schools that they came from. And these teachers were present during this time. And you can see also they were both a 7th and an 8th grade teacher, okay? So, gee, we thought that was great. We had all our teachers together, and we were then launching into professional development during the summer. And so then they begin in September of 2009, and we call that the B window. Okay, so you can see that these teachers were still there from the A window. They were still there in September, and we recorded how many tests they gave their kids and how many hours of professional development they had. Now you go on to April, which is the second, sort of the end of the second semester, and you start to see some changes within the first year. This particular teacher was transferred. So in September, or this teacher, by September, a year later, we had some teachers that were no longer teaching the CELS unit. So these teachers are no longer teaching, and this teacher now enters this school here, and she is in now the D window. So what happens is, in order to preserve the number of schools, we had to continually seek new consent forms from new teachers as they entered to not lose them from the system. But you'll notice that this teacher here did not have the professional development that was done here in the summer. So we had to do makeup sessions for this particular teacher, okay? And this shows how many hours of professional development that teacher had, okay? So what does this look like when we think about a school? So, or the entire study. So here we have the windows A, B, C, and D. So it's basically a little bit more than 15 months worth of data. This is the number of teachers that we had to start with in the control in June, when we got their consent, here and here, for a total of 97. Okay? By the time they were a year later, we were down to 61. We had basically 43 new teachers enter the system. This is not an aberration. This is our Arizona data. Likewise, the number of teachers in 6th grade that began in June, these are all of our districts in Arizona here. You can see that, and these are our 6th grade and our 7th grade teachers. In one school, we started with 6 teachers, and by the next year we had only 1 left. We had an 83% attrition rate. 50% here. This is within 1 year, okay? So we have coined a term that's different than attrition. We call it churn, or Bob Baruch calls it ambient positional instability. And what it means is that if you think about what is normally counted as leaving a study or attrition, it's the yellow. Okay, somebody resigned, or they retired from the district, they took a sabbatical, or they had a health issue, a personal thing, or some sort of inactivity. This is data from Philadelphia. We had 82 teachers who we called were unstable in the study. So about 30% of these folks, sort of, this might be considered the usual thing about attrition. But we found another 70% that's not normally counted, that were, for purposes of the study, might still be employed from the district. In fact, most of them were, but they were no longer in the position to be in the study. So, for example, 18 of them changed grade levels. They went from teaching 7th grade to 4th grade. Or they actually changed subject areas. They went from teaching science to teaching math. Some of them became administrators or were laid off from the system. I view this blue as areas that are under, theoretically, the control of a district. About 70% of the instability that you saw is due to sort of discretionary instability in the system. But it wreaks havoc on trying to do an intervention. In the case of our CogSci intervention, we had a 50% instability rate, 50% from 1 year to the next. And so for me, the policy implication is that we saw not only in Philadelphia, but in Arizona, is that no matter, even if your intervention is perfect, you've fully developed it, unless you have a stable teaching force here, you're going to be constantly in a process of professional development. But more than that, if you assume, for example, that it might take 2 years, a year of training, a year of practice, till you finally get it and do it right, you might be talking 2 or 3 years to actually see the effect of an intervention. But if your teachers don't stay around even 1 year, you're never getting to a point where it's like you're picking the green apples before they've been ripe. And you're constantly picking the green apples. Here's some data, and I'll just conclude with this, from Philadelphia, on the percentages of new teachers. They studied it from October of 2000 to October 2005. And this is how many of the original cohort who remained in the district or remained in their school. So you see that after that first year, by this year, there are 30% that are even in the district. So you can see that if it takes maybe 3 years before something kicks in, this is new teachers, you've already lost half. But the instability occurs not only with new teachers, it occurs with veteran teachers as well. And so for me, the big takeaway from this study is to think about, and Andy talked about reconceptualizing professional development and content, and I would add to that to say you need to the policymakers and funders need to reconsider their investments in schools where you've got, for school improvement, where you have massive instability in the system. And this is just science instability. We haven't even talked about sort of the ambient positional instability of having a lot of other teachers and other subjects also be moving around. And so you have this sort of school picture of a lot of churn going on, and with that, an inability to form a stable teacher culture. I don't know if that rings true, but anyway, that's my little comment for this morning, along with Andy. So at this point, let's open it up to conversation. Andy, I don't know if you want to help moderate this, but.